Yeah. And like, they didn't even care whether you were thin or not. They just wanted to sell you some cigarettes.
I was told that in order to have a successful career, I needed to be between a UK 2, which doesn't even really exist on your scale here. It's a 00 in America.
I have too much to say on ozempic.
One of the ways in which women can exert power is through their social network.
Was that tech thing, move fast and break things? Yes, well done. You broke the mental health of an entire generation.
Go to bed with a tiny figure that they feel they're going to break.
It is physically repulsive for some people to see women literally taking up space.
Hi, I'm Christina Rhodes.
And I'm Tempest Rose.
We are 2 millennial women 4 decades in.
We're revisiting the culture that made us, with a little more hindsight.
And a lot less bullshit.
We've made our own rules.
Built our own spotlights.
And we're here to speak our minds without playing dumb.
And without playing nice.
Well, I love today's topic because I think it's just, other than dogs as surrogate children, one of the most millennial topics ever, which is body image. And I think for some of our younger listeners, you are just not going to believe the levels of like normalization that happened with what we were shown through popular culture. It's so different now. It's so different now from what we grew up with. Anyway, we'll get into that, of course. But I guess when we talk about our teenage years, early teenage years, late childhoods, early 20s, we're talking about 90s and noughties, give or take. So when you were a teenager, how was your body image?
For sure. Well, before I start on that, though, I just want to put it out there that I actually wonder, and I'd be very curious to hear from people if you have an opinion on this, how different it actually is. Because I think the normalization is hopefully very different. Because I think, like you said, we went through just this crazy time period where heroin chic was what you were supposed to be, which is just absolute madness. But I know, and then we'll get into this later, that there's still, anorexia, disordered eating, other eating disorders are still very prevalent. And I think social media has been a big contributor, which is not something that we grew up with. So I think we still see it, unfortunately. I think we just see it in a very different way.
That's true. Maybe I'm wrong.
The point of the podcast, we could both be wrong.
It's true. You heard it here first, and it won't happen again. But I suppose each generation has its like particular stresses when it comes to body image, its particular ideals. And yes, you are definitely right that social media has changed entirely. I mean, we were very lucky because we didn't have social media growing up. When I tell you, listeners, that I remember the day that I heard about email for the first time, and I thought, well, what's the point of that? You could call somebody or you could just write them a letter. I mean, I feel 1,000 years old when I say that. But obviously we had computers and the internet, but we didn't have smartphones and we didn't have Instagram. And that, all statistics show that has been a huge negative impact on boys and girls, but girls in particular. So our stresses for body ideals were very different, but I guess at least we could turn them off. Like you could shut the magazine, you could turn off the TV, you could take yourself away from mainstream popular culture in a way that kids today have less of an option to do so.
I think it's a really interesting turn of phrase because I think you're right. But I also think that if we are, I was reading an article in Glamour just before we started this, written by a woman who's our age. And she was sharing, her experience of the sort of negative body image that she grew up with and how she still feels it and how so many women that she reaches out to who are our age still feel it. So while it was separate from us in a, I would say, really nice way compared to social media, could we switch it off? Can we still switch it off? Have we ever managed to totally switch it off? I'm not sure I have.
Well, I will say, so I work in burlesque, for those of you who don't know, but when I met Christina, so did she. This is how we became friends. And I mean, we'll do a little rundown, I think, of maybe our relationships over time with our body image. But burlesque has had a huge impact, I'll say right now, on how I feel about my body. And I work with women all the time through teaching in burlesque and how they feel about their bodies. So, yeah, I suppose you're right in that there are a lot of millennial women who still haven't let go of the images that we were shown when we were younger. And then, I get it. It's been exacerbated by them being on social media. I suppose I've been very lucky because I've landed in an industry that's helped me unpack a lot of that. And I now use that to help other women deal with their own body image. But it's definitely true that for a lot of women our age, they still carry those huge mental burdens, really, at the end of the day, based on how they feel around themselves. So that sucks.
Yeah. So going back to your question, so when I was growing up, I mean, I remember playing with Barbie dolls. This is back when you could only get a blonde Barbie doll, blonde white Barbie doll, and that having an impact on me. And I also remember, like every single magazine, it was only tiny. I remember Bridget Jones' Diary coming out. And I was like older at this point. But yeah, it was, she was she's significantly smaller than I am now. And I'm a size 12 UK. And she was so fat.
She was so fat.
And all the guys in the movie are commenting on like, oh, you're so like roly-poly. And it's like, no man ever has made that comment to me. I'd also kick them out of bed.
Well, Love Actually, which isn't even super old. It's like, what, the one with the chunky thighs, sir?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, they're very hefty. I mean, there are so many millennial like women's memes like unpacking all of this. And I like millennial women are still so angry about this. I'm like, I get it, ladies. I get it. It was weird. Also, because we had this whole kind of lads mags. We still had Page 3, which I don't think is around anymore. It was much more normalized in magazines, in our national newspapers to see Cat Deely shows off fatty, flabby thighs on new holiday with latest lover. Like, they would literally print pictures of celebrity women on holiday and circle where they had cellulite, where there was the tiniest roll. And these were obviously celebrity women. They're going to be a size 8, a size 6, a size 10, heaven forbid, maybe a 12, if they really wanted to push the boat out. It wasn't the case in the 90s and noughties at all that having like thick thighs, like juicy bums and stuff was glamorized at all. This was not a thing. You were slender, or you were basically a cow.
Yeah. And I know we're going to do a separate topic on separate chat on body modification because I do think the Kardashians have played such an interesting role in this because like now you have all these women having, butt enhancements, but at the same time, it's still an unrealistic, you're still modifying your body to reach an unrealistic expectation. And, whether it's a waif or something curvier, it's still controlled. And she does not have a flabby tummy in any way, shape, or form. but anyway, so whatever. So I had these unnatural influences when I was growing up. And I did get to a point when I was in high school that I didn't suffer from an eating disorder. I think that would be too strong a word, though I unfortunately had close friends who did. But I definitely suffered from disordered eating. And I think it's something that I've struggled with my whole life. And I would say that the moments in my life when I have felt a reprise from that is when I was involved in burlesque, because I think it also had a huge impact for me and it allowed me to feel a lot more comfortable, which is ridiculous because when I was performing burlesque, it was also like size 8, sometimes even a 6. You know what I mean? Like just tiny. And I'm 5'10", so like tiny. But that doesn't, what matters is sort of how you feel about it, I think. And so, so I think it was all of these images had a really negative effect on me that I do think I still carry around today to some degree. I'm a card-carrying Ozempic user. Don't
you
tell my GP.
I have too much to say on Ozempic. You cannot use the O word.
Well, rewind.
Okay, you have to wipe that from your minds for like another 40 minutes, please.
Tell me how you felt about you back in the day. Little Tempest
Rosy Posy. I will, but I will tell you 2 things quickly before that. The first one is I think nearly all women, the majority of women, let's rein it in a little, have a form of disordered eating.
Do you think so?
Yes, I do. I've come to realize this. And most of them don't realize. And obviously, that's a very broad term. So some will be more extreme than others. And I don't say that to like minimize it for anybody. I think that's really awful. Actually, that makes me really sad when I think about that. I think, unfortunately, it's become such an intrinsic part of the female experience to fret constantly and to worry over your size, and it's compounded in so many different directions that I just think you can never unpack that enough. Like I really hope we get to a day where that's not the case, but it's not today. And, like we said, we're in our 40s. Maybe it's changed since we were younger. It manifests differently, but you make a good point. It's not got better. The statistics show it hasn't got better. We have a friend, Dolores Deluxe, my burlesque mother. And a few years ago, she ran a series of workshops on body positivity. And it was a one-off workshop. So she was doing the same workshop to hundreds of women. And it was so fascinating because she said that the way women felt about their bodies had zero correlation to how closely they were to the mainstream of ideal for beauty. And that, again, like that's such an important thing, I think, to be noted. It doesn't actually really matter what you look like and how closely you fit the ideal. It's these ingrained thought processes that happen outside of that. Yeah, for myself, so I was always very slender as a kid. Thank God, because I was thinking last night, when you think of the cause and effect of your upbringing, my parents, if I'd have been a larger child or any of my siblings had, we would have had a miserable childhood. I did not grow up in a household that was about like self-love when it came to your body. My parents are older than a lot of other parents my age, so they might be closer in age to some people's grandparents, to be honest, and they definitely had those old-fashioned ideals of like, you eat what's put in front of you. Like we had no junk food. Processed food was not a thing in our house at all growing up. You were active. Like a Sunday afternoon was being dragged on a hike up a mountain. Like it was not... It was a very old-fashioned household in that way, if that's even the right way of describing it, but hopefully you guys know what I mean. My mother was very vocal about the benefits and the beauty of slenderness. So it's amazing. I didn't grow up with an eating disorder. I loved Barbies. All the Barbies I could eat.
Yeah.
I loved having Barbies.
Love their toes.
Yeah. And so I don't know why I managed to kind of escape some of that. So I was very slender growing up. And it wasn't until I got to my 30s, I went up like at least a dress size and then at least another dress size when I got to 40. And in COVID, we all put on weight, I think, or a lot of us did. And so I struggled very little with my body image when I was a teenager, but I feel like I had to do a lot of that work when I got to my 30s and my 40s because I had a body that I was entirely unused to having, and I had to think for the very first time about what I wore, how I exercised, what I ate. And I mean, some of you will want to punch me in the face for this next sentence, and that's fine. I'd never had to think about any of those things before. So that's really helped me. I know.
Tiniest violin in the whole world.
Yeah, get it out. It better be a good tune. So I have a different experience in that way. The other thing I'll add into the mix, because it's relevant for our conversation today, is I went to a normal mixed state school until I was 11 or 12. And then I went to a very academic all-girls school. And I mean, it's like two different planets. And in my secondary school, my all-girls school, eating disorders, anorexia, bulimia, self-harm was the norm. Like that was everywhere. So although I didn't personally suffer from it, I grew up in an environment surrounded by young girls who were talking about this, doing it, and in various stages of, being medicalized, or it was more of a social thing. We'll get into social contagion and stuff. So I do have a lot to say on sort of that pocket of girl adolescence.
It's an interesting one, and I'd love to hear more about why you think that, I know we're going to go into this, but why, sort of where you think this drive for so many people to unfortunately fall into those circumstances came from. Because it's interesting, when I look back, I guess something I didn't mention is, so when I look back at my high school years, right, it was whatever you call them, your A-levels here, or whatever, I remember, I had a close friend who had a eating disorder. All my friends were really thin. Everybody around me was really thin. And so, but I don't actually remember that anything about me wanting to be thin was about wanting to fit. Like it was about, maybe part of it was wanting to fit in, but it wasn't about being attractive to men. It wasn't about, I was getting plenty of attraction just however I looked as it was. also like a little violent.
All right.
Plenty of like uncomfortable things there too. You start getting hit on when you're 12 because you're 5'10". It's not necessarily a good thing.
We will definitely do an episode on that.
But it was interesting. So I feel like my disordered eating had a different flavor to it when I was in high school. But then after I left high school, I did 1 year of university and then I dropped out because my best friend and I were going to go become Hollywood actresses. She actually achieved that. I did not. And we set out our own agenda of what we were going to do. And part of this included that we went to go see a nutritionist. And, we were 2 tiny ladies, and Lita was like probably size UK 8. And again, at 5'10". And she was like, no, you eat way too much. It's disgusting. And she put us on a diet of 1,200. She put us in a deficit diet, right? So I ate between 1,000 and 1,200 calories a day in my mid-20s.
You
I
are
was
kidding.
also exercising an hour a day.
You are joking.
No, so
because you wanted to be actresses?
Yeah,
or they would have said that to you anyway?
No, because we wanted to be actresses.
Right.
And so I was told that in order to have a successful career, I needed to be between a UK 2, which doesn't even really exist on your scale here, is a 00 in America, and a 4. So it just insanely small. And so I was hungry and angry all the time. And I feel like that, and then that became, but that in Hollywood, this concept back then that you had, and probably still today, that your worth as an actress wasn't all about how talented you were or how good you were actually going to be on screen. It was much more about what you actually looked like. And that was where your value came from. And that was a sort of warped mentality that I hope we're getting away from today, even if it's still, but I mean, maybe we're not, I don't know. So this like, is your self-worth based in how much you mold into current beauty trends?
Wow. Now, I mean, that's wild. But of course, the minute you said, no, it was specifically because of acting, I thought, yeah. I mean, obviously, I still disagree with it, but I assume they were right. Like, they were just telling you the unvarnished truth without the lens of whether it's morally acceptable or not. I think we went through a period, a little fig leaf, if you will, of size inclusivity in media, but I still think it's very much a like, all right, here's your token fatty, the rest of you, put those burgers down. You still hear stories from actresses. I guess it's great that they can talk about it more, but who are like, nope, I was told I had to be this size. I had to get to the gym. Is she eating again? Call her up and make sure she's on the treadmill. And acting, even traditional theatre, because I was having this similar discussion with a friend of mine who's a theatre actress in the UK, and she was like, no, you have to be as thin as possible. It's about being bird-like. And I just cannot help but link this to this idea of like, it is physically repulsive for some people to see women literally taking up space. You must literally take up as little space as possible. Ooh.
I mean, I think you're right. I don't have any like factual points to reference, but you certainly get that impression.
For sure. Otherwise, why?
Yeah. I mean, we did talk about it a little bit around this concept that, when we were growing up, we had the dawn, or maybe not the dawn of, but the real celebration of the supermodel. And it was that time where, what was the famous quote? Nothing tastes as good as
skinny feels. Oh, yeah.
Kinky Kate Moss. Oh, God. But yeah, so we grew up in this day and age. There's, loads of amazing supermodels. I mean, I think they are amazing, but also maybe very traumatic for the entire generation. So is that their fault? I don't know. But anyways, you grew up in a society where that was a thing. And from a designer's perspective, if you have a model with curves, and you want them to be for the clothing to enhance them, then you need to build the clothing around them, right? You need to sort of situate it in a certain way that's going to look fantastic and really celebrate their figure. If you have a woman who is basically more like a coat hanger and has no body and no curves and has lots of attitude walking down the runway, but the clothes just fall on her and they drape on her in a very different way, then there's, that can be seen as a positive, right? Because for the clothing looks amazing. And so if you look at how fashion and this sort of heroin chic and the Calvin Klein and all these like influences around the really like skinny was being populated into our society, it was coming from this fashion world where, they have like an interest in making sure that the models are as tiny as possible. It's not interesting to them to celebrate the female figure.
Yes. I cannot stress this, what you've just said enough. The day I realized what you've just highlighted, and it's so important, it was like a light bulb moment for me. And I was watching this catwalk show and I was just like, oh, but they don't care about the models. They care about the clothes. Your job is to be a walking coat hanger. The other factor is, which I learned after having this exact discussion with a friend of mine who works in fashion, couture fabrics are so expensive that you make sample sizes tiny because otherwise you would waste so much money on your sample sizes to be worn. You already, if I understand correctly, couture loses money already. It's the affiliate brands that they do like Armani jeans and stuff that actually make the big money for them. So it was such a revelation because I'd just grown up with this ridiculous notion that like fashion pushed really skinny models because that's their feminine ideal. Now, fashion pushes skinny models because that's makes their clothes look better. The fact that we've then taken that and put that on top of women as the ideal of how they're supposed to look, that's the deranged part. And it actually allowed me to like let go of a lot of kind of hang-ups about what I thought people were trying to tell me I was supposed to look like because they didn't care about me. It was literally not about me or the models. But, the confusion is clear, obviously, because these models, the supermodel, they were big celebrities in our day. So, of course, we would be like, oh, Linda Evangelista, Kate Moss. But then I suppose they became their own sort of celebrities on the runway. They were not regular runway models.
Yeah.
Although they were, of course, maintained their super slenderness.
No, it's interesting. I think it brings up another point which you have raised before because
I have.
We did sort of pull them out as this feminine ideal because that's what was being, advertised to us. But I think if you ask your average man, they don't, like your average heterosexual man, they don't want to go to bed with a tiny figure that they feel they're going to break. And I don't mean any offense to women that are super tiny, but it's not, I think biologically that might not actually be the driving beauty standard from your male, in a heterosexual relationship, your male counterpart who's looking for, on some sort of biological level, a mother as well. That's not really what's going to advertise that.
Yeah, 100%. Surely on a genetical level, you need a woman who looks like she'll do some hearty childbearing for you.
Good hips.
But also at the time, there were lots of comments and a whole stream of vulgar jokes of like, men like women with a bit of meat on them. I heard this all the time. And I think the sad thing is that a lot of men were equally confused by this obsession with slimness that we went through in the 90s and noughties because it's not actually, I think, a heterosexual male ideal. Yes, there are men who also want women to be pretty tiny and nondescript. Sure. It makes them feel more powerful and more masculine. But I don't think your average bloke is like that. And so I think we have some big questions to ask ourselves, like where in the culture is promoting this ideal of feminine slimness? Because I don't think your average guy is like, oh yeah, I want my women to be a size 00.
Yeah, totally. And I also think that, your sort of average guy also probably wants to be able to share a meal with you and
it's not so unsexy.
Yeah, not have you be totally obsessed with like only ordering the salad. I mean, I order a lot of salads because I'm now 40 and in between the chips that I eat, but like, it's slightly harder to work it out.
Men used to say this to me all the time, like, oh my God, great, it's so nice to see a woman eat dinner because again, don't hate me, I'm sorry. Like when I was younger, I didn't really have to think too much about what I ate. I love food. I'd order the steak, I'd get dessert. I'm not shoving food around my plate. And yeah, I mean, whether they were lying or not, but again, I think they were. I'm not sure anyone finds that exciting to be around people who are really having a difficulty in just like being able to enjoy a meal. Do you know what I mean?
But then that begs the question, then why are women so drawn to reaching these unattainable, sometimes ideals around thinness?
Well, yeah. It's a good question, where it comes from and why we participate in it. There's some of it which is going to be, and this goes back to the question of school, and I think played a part in the difference of maybe some of the schools that I went to. When you can't control a lot of what's going on around you, you control your own body. And traditionally, women have had, and young girls and teenagers in general have very little control over the circumstances of their life. So they exert an extreme form of control over their own bodies.
Mm-hmm.
That's a factor. I know it's like super complicated and slightly different for everybody. There is a whole thing about girls not wanting to age into womanhood. I don't remember that being talked about at the time. And there were a lot of discussions about like anorexia and bulimia when we were younger as well. But there is a sort of tendency for men exert their stress and boys outwards and girls and women inwardly. That's why self-harm tends to be more of a thing with young girls versus, I'm making mass generalizations obviously, but I do think this is a trend. You know, boys will get into a fight at school if they're having a difficult time. A girl will tend to do an activity that harms herself more, that withdraws into herself. And again, this kind of control over eating, this idea of self-harm, of not wanting to go through adolescence, puberty, womanhood, all of this restricted eating when you're younger, there are those elements there. As women age, the control factor is still there, but you're already in womanhood, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I do wonder how much of it is around playing up to other women, you know what I mean? As much as it is, if not probably more so than playing up to men.
Yes, tell me more.
I mean,
why would we do that?
This is not based on any statistics, kids. I think that women have historically, in our society, been stripped of a lot of avenues for power which men have access to. I think wanting to exert control or power is a very natural human desire. And so one of the ways in which women can exert power is through their social network and through, you know, rising to the top of their social network or dragging other women down in their social network. And, you know, then people basically double down inside of that. So I think there's something to be said for if women buy into this is the beauty standard, then and you want to rise to the top, it's not really about necessarily trying to find the best spouse by being as emaciated as possible, but by rising in the social ranks.
Oh, yes. That's so depressing.
I know. It really is.
You're beating women at a woman, it's not entirely women invented, but to get a woman invented or dominated standard of beauty. Yeah. Ooh, I think you're right. And there's a female bonding thing that goes on as well. So in my burlesque classes, I make this rule that women aren't allowed to self-trash talk. It's a very British thing, but it's a woman thing as well. To use self-depreciation in general conversation as a way of ingratiating yourself to other people in the group. Men do that too. They'll laugh at themselves in bands, lad bands. I think women do it through their bodies. And the reason that I ban it is because, one, it's fucking boring. And two, because it's like a little domino effect. The moment a woman says something like, oh, you've got such lovely big boobs. They're so beautiful. I don't have any boobs at all, so I couldn't possibly do a shimmy. It would look terrible on me. And someone else goes, no, what are you talking about? You have lovely boobs. I wish I had boobs like yours. I've just got this flat bum here. Oh, no, your bum's... on and on into infinity. And it's this kind of connection via, like self-depreciation. But it's always physical, I notice. So it's a strange form of bonding. I suppose it's a way of saying I'm not a threat to you.
Yeah. That definitely could be it. It's interesting. I do think it's quite, I find that I can sometimes fall into that trap too. You hear a friend say, oh God, well, even some of the things we've said on this podcast episode, do you know what I mean? Like it's so much harder to lose weight or keep on top of the weight that you are when you're older. But that, do you know what I mean? Like just even like referencing it at all, thinking about it at all, rather than just being like, actually, it can be difficult to eat a balanced diet when you work some of the insane hours that you or I work.
That is also true. I've had a revelation, again, like a revelation. It's so dramatic. A stage that helped me. in my processing of my changing body, which is that it's much more normal for women to have an ebb and flow in their body size due to periods, due to hormones, and because your body at different ages will prepare itself for what it thinks is coming normally, childbirth, and delightfully coming soon for both of us, menopause. Yay! I'm so excited to go through something I know nothing about. And and so I do think there's this thing like you feel like a bit of a freak, like, oh, I was tiny yesterday and now I'm a fat monster today. Because until recently, and I only say that not because I think it's wildly different, but because I'm obviously looking back on my own life, that's not really been discussed. I didn't really know that that wasn't just me, that is just a normal thing for women. We are not meant to be the same size all the time.
Yeah.
It's unnatural.
Yeah, completely. So I naturally fluctuate between 3 sizes, and I basically always have done. But you're so right. It's never talked about. Like so many things about women's health are never talked about.
So
Just get to learn them on our own in a vacuum.
I know.
We're totally alone.
In total isolation.
Yay. Oh, God.
So talking about people talking about body weight, I always have this like glitch in my life because, and I can't say all pockets of burlesque are like this at all, but I suppose because I run my own company, I get to pick and choose who I surround myself with the majority of the time. And at House of Burlesque, it's not normal chat to kind of talk about what we ate that day. Are we feeling bigger or smaller today? Oh, I ate so much yesterday and now I feel so bloated. And I'm actually really against a lot of chat like that. Some people get mad at me when I say that. I'll explain why. Because I think it's actually a very specific neuroses put on women to stop us thinking about more important things. Imagine what you could think about in your life if you cleared the mental space that's currently taken up with how much am I eating, what size am I currently, all the stuff that we've sort of normalized in thinking about all the time. And so I really try to wheeze that out in a lot of the circles that I'm in, and it doesn't really happen at work. And I made the mistake of thinking that that's the case everywhere. It is not. And I'm always so jarred when I come into a situation of people who I'm new to being around and hear these conversations again. And I'll be really honest, there is a part of my brain like splits into 2. And one half of me is listening to the chat and the other half of me is going, I don't understand. Why are they talking about this? Like for me, talking about your body weight and how you feel about your body image, unless it's the topic of conversation, is quite a personal discussion. You might do that with your friends, people that you're intimate with, but it's not really a chat around strangers. So I'm always confused when somebody starts talking about this. Firstly, I find it, sorry, some of you might feel very triggered by this in terms of like, I'm not talking about anyone specifically, it's a broad thing. When I have a conversation of a group of people who I am new to, I'm thinking about what might interest them and how what I bring up might say something about me. So I find it super odd when I meet people and they talk about stuff like their size, whether they're feeling fat that day, what diet they're on, what they've eaten. And I'm like, but we've just met. Are you honestly telling me that this is the most interesting thing that you have to say? And also, like, these aren't conversations. It's like a form of social masturbation because I've never watched one of these people then go, oh, do you feel that way? It's always a monologue about how they feel. And it looks like a conversation. It's very clever because someone else will then go, oh, and then they'll monologue, socially masturbate about their own calorie count for the day. And then the third person might join in. But it's not actually a conversation. It's very self-absorbed and it's fucking boring. Oh my God. Is this literally the most interesting thing that you have to say about yourself? That's what you're telling me. That's what I can't get over. I know that's not true because I've gotten to know some of these people and they're very smart and interesting. So I still can't fathom why that's the thing you thought that I had to hear about first.
It's such an interesting point, and it's totally minimizing and horrible. But going back to your point about the classes that you teach, like I do think it's a pretty acceptable nowadays form of conversation and almost a form of bonding that you, do you know what I mean? Like you can kind of expect that a lot of other women, at least of a certain age, will be, if you moan about one thing about your body, that they will moan about it too, and then you're all sort of, I don't know, de-threatenizing each other. I'm not really sure. But I wonder, another thing is if you are talking about going into maybe like a newer group of people, maybe especially a group of women, and this is what they're talking about, and it's interesting that you view that as a personal thing, because I think it's so socially acceptable to just sort of hate talk your body, basically, and that's seen as okay. But there's so many conversations now which are not okay and are like potential landmines that I wonder how much people are. It's also like a little form of, it's a topic of conversation you kind of know a lot of people will sort of buy into.
God,
versus
really?
There's so many other things that people just don't talk about. Or maybe the world's just gotten a lot more fucking boring. Who knows?
Well, that's probably true. You raise an interesting point. I would offset it by saying that I very rarely hear heterosexual men have conversations like this.
I don't think I've ever heard a heterosexual male have a conversation like this.
Heterosexual men don't sit around and talk about dieting with each other in a billion years. Now, that's not to say that they're having like super more interesting conversations with each other. They're probably not. But for me, that flags a problem. Like whenever I look at something, and if we live in this world where we've said that like heterosexual men are at the top of the food tree here, if they're not doing something that other people are, I'm going to wonder what's happening here. And I do think it's really sad that a lot of my male gay friends who I adore, but I've watched over time as a group, not necessarily as individuals, normalize this way of talking as well. And in a way, more so than a lot of the women I know, because I think women have a sort of activism against this, not in all women's circles, but I think if you sat down with a group of women and said, hey, you know that we really shouldn't talk about this shit, it's not good for us, and there are more important things to talk about, they'd probably laugh and go, yeah, you're right. Like, this is a discussion that's in the zeitgeist that actually this is relatively frivolous compared to things that maybe we could put our attention to. And so I don't know what's going on there. Why you're waving a finger at me? So go for it.
I am. Well, I do. No, listen, I am not endorsing talking about this or this being like a point of conversation. I completely agree with you. I think it's a total waste of good mental energy that could be put to better uses. But I also wonder whether or not it is a status symbol to some degree. And I don't know. I could be absolutely wrong on this. Very happy to be totally wrong on this. But, I do think that when it comes to not necessarily like the actual medical health industry, but like the health industry around it, or sort of the dieting industry around it, it costs money to buy supplements, to eat unprocessed food, to have fresh fruit and vegetables every day, to work out loads, to have cute exercise clothes, like all of this stuff, which can be for many people wrapped around genuine health. And for some people is maybe a mix of the both of two. And then for other people is maybe just about body image and weight and size. But I wonder if there is a part of it that's also, maybe part of that conversation is gonna be like, oh, like I've been like, I don't know, I've been taking my 149 pound a month ozempic every month, and I'm like still fat, or I go to my spin class 3 times a week, and I'm like still not losing any weight. Like spin class costs 20 pounds a session, people.
Yeah. Yes, I think there's a Venn diagram going on here for sure, and there's a massive crossover between that circle and some of what we were talking about before. For me, I think of that as wellness. And wellness has its pockets of elitism for sure.
Oh, yeah.
100%.
Watch that space, guys.
Yeah.
Wellness and luxury are on a skyrocket together.
I had a really funny newspaper headline pop up on my phone, which I sent to you, which was Ozempic is ruining my social life and I'm not even taking it. And I have never laughed so hard in my entire life. I didn't realize that people talking about them taking Ozempic was like an acceptable form of social interaction.
Oh, yeah.
I just was totally unaware. I've never heard anything like it in my life.
I know. What I find really terrifying, though, is that, and maybe some people would judge me for this too, but I have friends who are legitimate size 8s who take Ozempic. Like, what are you doing? Definitely the GP would not allow this if they knew this is going on. And you are not obese. Your BMI is, and BMI is also some issues, I know, but like, you do not have a weight problem, right? Like, you have a self-image problem. This is what's going on. But like, it's just, I mean, you called it out earlier. You thought that Ozempic could be seen as supporting disordered eating.
I do, as I told my doctor the other day, which she was not impressed about. I think Ozempic can be potentially life-saving for some people.
Absolutely.
I think it has a medical usage. I'm not against it in its entirety. But I think in some circles, it's a normalized form of an eating disorder. You are taking an appetite suppressant.
Yeah.
If you're taking it for non-medical reasons, I think that's worrying.
Back in the 90s, they were called diet pills or laxatives.
Right? Facts. Oh my God, facts. And the 90s is back in aesthetic and plastic surgery, but that's a topic for another time. Yeah. Have you seen like all these celebrities? Like Christina Aguilera looks exactly the same as she did when the Stripped album dropped. I find that terrifying. Just as tiny, skin, face.
The skin we're going to get into in the next episode.
Yes. Yes. And everyone's obsessed with who their plastic surgeons are. I find it a little sad because you see her, and look, I'm just using her in as an example. There are lots of examples of this out there, next to her daughter, and they look the same age. I don't want to stand next to my mother and look like the same age, or that she looks younger than me, or God forbid, she looks more conventionally beautiful than me through almost $250,000, millions of pounds worth of surgery. Oh.
So I totally agree with you, but I think it's interesting because if you're a celebrity, you're just a person. In Christina Aguilera's, instance, she's been famous since she was little. She's always been in the spotlight. She is extraordinarily talented, but she's just a person, right? And so we hold these celebrities to these standards that they should be role models. But I don't think a celebrity signed up to be a role model when they decided that they wanted to go pursue singing or acting or modeling or sports or anything else. Like, they just want to do the thing that they're doing. At least that's what it used to be. Now it's about being famous, but that doesn't make you a better person. And I think also if you have all of the pressure, we're talking about normal people, quote, normal people who are not on the cover of magazines, who millions of people are not watching and wondering who their plastic surgeon is. And they're feeling just as vulnerable and wanting to, look younger or skinnier, or, whatever this thing is. I think it's unfair to like judge, not that you are, but I think it's unfair people judge somebody like Christina Aguilera because she didn't sign up to be a role model. I think it's our weird culture that we attach that to celebrities. They're not role models.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I do judge our society for treating celebrities like role models, and social media has really made that a lot worse because now you have this curated idea that you're seeing them every day. Obviously, all of that's as fictionalized as one magazine article, which you might used to find once a month on your favorite celebrity. We now get their entire lives, but it's still just as manicured, but it's presented as real life. That's really damaging. And you have the whole, is it parasocial relationships? You have a celebrity that you follow all the time, so you've sort of imagined an actual relationship with them whereby none exists. So when they are heartbroken, you're really upset. Like a
parasite.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, it's a parasitical social media relationship, exactly, with a celebrity. Yes, I do agree with what you're saying. I'm not sure I agree with it entirely. I do think there comes a point where you have chosen celebrity over just being a good singer. There's no need for Christina Aguilera to, and I'll go to the other bit, maybe post in the way that she does or to the extent that she does or the types of images that she does. But I would also agree with you that, like, I'm using her as an example of a whole trend. I'm not necessarily mad at her as an individual. She's a famous person, I guess, trying to stay relevant in a world that expects her to jump through certain hoops as a celebrity. But I'm also very against, and this isn't what you're doing, but there's a sort of exaggerated version of this that happens, and it relates to what we talked about when we wanted to, the positives from this podcast. There's a big trend that's like, oh, you can never shame an individual for something, which stops you talking about a trend. And that's very real. You didn't do it, but there's certainly another conversation I could have been in where I would have said what I said before and somebody would have gone, well, you're just skinny shaming her. And that's really awful. Like, how dare you talk about her? Like, it's not for you to cast judgment on how she lives her life. No, I'm talking about a celebrity who couldn't give a fuck about what my opinion is. And I'm using that as an example of a greater trend that we must unpack.
Totally. And I also think, we've talked about this a little bit before, but I think that you do need to be aware of, like, whether or not they signed on to be a role model. You do need to be aware that people that are in the public eye are being a role model for young children, in this instance, young girls, and how are their choices, including choosing to embrace being a functional anorexic, how is that sort of like populating downstream? And is that okay? And I think I would say this, I think it's important to like not signal out the person, because yeah, you're right. Like no celebrity cares what we have to think, right? Nor should they.
I'm sure their wealth will keep them warm at night whilst they cry about it.
Yeah, like, they just don't care. I'm sure, hopefully, like the least scathing people too. But what I would say is that people are people, right? And so if your average person feels this kind of pressure, certainly somebody who's in the limelight is going to feel this kind of pressure too. And I think it's a balancing act between asking people who are in the limelight to take more responsibility for it, but also taking a step back and asking society at large to take responsibility for shifting the way that we view these things. And for, in like the everyday conversations to be like, we shouldn't be talking about this. As women, let's stand together and like not sort of hold up this as our ideal.
What do you think about the term skinny shaming?
I think it's complicated. I think skinny shaming and fat shaming are both complicated. Again, I think that we live in a world where, unfortunately, particularly the younger generation has to deal with a lot of online bullying, which I think is toxic on a level that I am so grateful we never had to experience, and is just hideous. And I really worry about the future repercussions of that. A young girl in the UK died a couple weeks ago, took her own life because of online bullying, and it happens all the time. Do you know what I mean? But I don't think that you should be calling out people individually in a kind of like online bullying, online harassment. I feel really strongly that should not exist. But I would say it's just totally contextual, right? So are you skinny shaming, Brenda from accounts, or like Jacqueline who sits next to you? Like, or are you, which is not a good use of anyone's time and not a nice thing to do, and will buy you no karma points in the afterlife, or are you creating a forum to discuss and critique openly that our society has an obsession with people looking a certain way that's not healthy and isn't probably natural to a lot of people's bodies, and isn't also natural to necessarily to the age that they're at. Maybe when you're 12, it's slightly more likely that you're going to be a little bit skinnier than when you're 65, and that's natural. So I'd say it's contextual. What do you think about skinny shaming?
I agree with you on the context. I think zoning in and nitpicking on individuals' body sizes is most likely harmful. I'm trying to think of an exception. I'm sure there isn't one, or it's incredibly rare and it is unfair and unhelpful. Skinny shaming is interesting because for so long, like, skinny shaming was just not a thing when we were younger. Like, and neither really, like, we called it fat shaming, but we didn't have that language at the time.
No.
But, you just said horrible things about overweight people, and even people who weren't overweight, but you called overweight with horrible words to bully them and belittle them. lifetime on, what is it? Moment on the lips, a lifetime on the hips. Like all of this chat was like normal. So when people started using the term fat shaming, I do think there was this like, oh, there's a term for that. Yes, we can see how that's harmful. And then I probably went through a period of skinny shaming where I was a bit like, all right. Like, for so long, you've been at the top of the body food tree. Are we really making a like-for-like comparison here to what people who are in larger bodies have had to suffer? But I get it, of course. And often the root of this isn't necessarily to do with anybody's individual size. It's all just a way of belittling people and bullying people, I guess. But I so I'll bring up an example which will be very prevalent in everybody's minds, unless you're listening to this way in the future, which is the round of press interviews done by the two stars of the film Wicked. And this spawned a whole load of comedy memes. There was a lot of finger clutching. I don't know why, using the words holding space. It was all very hilarious. But one of the discussions was the size of these two actresses. They're so slender. And there's actually a lot of, in its positive end, concern over particularly Ariana Grande's figure. And she's certainly a young person who has been through a lot. So if she has trauma from that, no one would be surprised. And I thought it opened up a really interesting conversation because they were obviously incredibly slender. And there was a lot of like helpful and unhelpful commentary on this. There's definitely a social media perspective, social media driven form of kind of activism perspective, which is like, no one should be commenting on anybody's bodies ever. And I think this is not only nonsense, I think it's actually harmful. I think that we have to be able to discuss what is being shown as acceptable. And by acceptable, I mean being normalized, especially when it comes to celebrities, because we can say all we want. We shouldn't hold celebrities up as these be all and end all role models. But the reality is we do. And actually, it's hard grained into human society to have figureheads that we look up to, that we want to emulate. It's a really interesting kind of way social hierarchy works. So that's never going to go away. So it's beholden to us as a society, surely, to make some rules over what we think is good role models and what we think are bad role models. And what we also, which I suppose is what you're saying, now I've said the word bad role models, what are not necessarily bad people, but are things that we need to unpack. Sorry, I'm not comfortable showing very famous, incredibly wealthy, and again, as I raised earlier, sometimes when people are rushing to protect celebrities, these are incredibly wealthy elites who could not give a flying fuck about you. They might say they do, but they don't. They also don't really care about what it is that we think. They're insulated from a lot of this. We have to be able to use these people as examples about what is productive and helpful, especially to young people, and what isn't. I'm not going to be shamed out of having a discussion about why it is not good for young girls to see incredibly slender to the point of emaciated role models that they are being shown as figureheads. And the fact that there are people trying to actively shut down that dialogue is incredibly odd to me. It's actually suspicious.
I would completely agree, because you think it's a silencing, right?
Yes.
It's a silencing and it's a shaming. And those things are always suspicious and usually never good. Not never, but usually never. But I think the way in which you're talking about it, it is important. I agree. Like, as a society, you use the word discussion and conversation, and those are things which are important, but they also imply a level of respect. And I think that is something that is sometimes missing from online dialogue or commentary, where you get
No.
I know. Not kidding. Never heard of a troll?
What, like Shrek?
But we live in this world, particularly social media, where people feel that they can sort of say whatever they want to online. So it's not really about opening up a dialogue. It's more about attacking people. And I don't believe that you should go attack Ariana Grande, which is not what I think you're saying. But do I think that we should have a conversation about that being that thin is probably not healthy, and is definitely not going to be healthy and like a healthy body weight for most people. Maybe some people will naturally fall into something similar, but I think those are two very different things, and it's important to sort of make the distinction.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the whole point around the podcast anyways, isn't it?
Yeah, that we should get to talk about these things and also understand that, like, I don't think you can make blanket rules on stuff, which is a shame, especially when you have the online space, which might need some adjudication every now and again.
Yeah. There was something else that we were talking about before that I just wanted to come back to a little bit, which I suppose, I mean, it's an interesting with your point about the wicked stars, but, is this concept that when we were growing up, at least you did feel that you sort of knew that people were not unattainable, but that they were celebrities and that it was in magazines and it was separate. Versus now, I looked up some of the statistics, and the Scandinavian Journal of Public Health reported that 46% of teens in the study that they did, aged 13 to 17, say that they feel worse about their bodies due to social media. And the people who spend over 3 hours daily on social media, which I know a lot of parents I know will tell me that their teenage children do, are twice as likely to develop an eating disorder. I wonder if part of that is because on social media, you do see people as being more normal. And even when celebrities are doing content, a lot of it is encouraged to be candid content. And it's not, a beautiful photo shoot done by Vanity Fair, but it's them in their house, it's them baking cookies, it's them like in their life without makeup, quote. But like, so you sort of have this sensation that actually this idea that this is what your life should look like, that this is natural, this is normal life for everybody else, and you're the abnormal one.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Oh, I think it's a real tragedy. We've enacted such a harm on children, and millennials as a generation, the older millennials, have to accept our part in that. Not you and I as individuals. We don't own Meta, otherwise we'd be super rich. But, the internet is made by millennials and younger Gen Xers, and we have just totally unleashed this horror onto younger children with no thought to the impact on society. Was that tech thing, move fast and break things? Yes, well done. You broke the mental health of an entire generation. Have a round of fucking applause. Like, when you just look back on the total freedoms from any kind of restriction, legislation, boundaries that were given to tech companies, well, anything. I was going to say particularly with regards to social media, AI, but that's not a topic for today. People will be horrified. People will be horrified. We've run a living experiment on all of us, but particularly young people who have not been shielded in any way from this. And I think it's despicable. And as a generation, I think we bear the responsibility collectively for that, which I'm sad about, obviously. So yes, this whole kind of the fashionable content, especially more and more nowadays, is for non-curated content. But the fact of the matter is every single picture you see that look like they snapped it in the back of a cab, there's probably a team either doing it or looking at it after, constructing it. I don't have time to run my tiny little business, keep a marriage going, and I don't know, call my parents once every 6 months. So the notion that a really famous celebrity who is a billion times more busy than me has the time to like snap some pictures, here's my carousel of what happened yesterday. Like, it's all completely curated, but much like in the 90s, where we had this idea of just got out of bed hair, the no makeup, images of beauty that were presented to us as totally spontaneous and natural, but took hours and hours and hours and a team of professionals. I guess social media candid content is the modern equivalent.
Yeah, I would say so. But actually, that reminds me of something else that you've brought up before that I think would be nice to share with listeners around the difference of the vintage beauty standard, which I think a lot of people on face value could see as like not necessarily totally positive. But I think the way in which you describe it was really interesting.
So I've done 2 odes to Gypsy Rose Lee in my career. And for those of you who don't know burlesque, if there are any of you left, Gypsy Rose Lee is a very famous burlesque performer from the vintage era, and her whole shtick was talking while she was disrobing. So I did 2 tributes to her. The first one, I got undressed, discussed burlesque, and then the second one, I got dressed on stage and discussed body image. And my main thread of that chat, which is what we've discussed before, and I think is one of the reasons people really love burlesque, is that there's a comfort in the obvious artifice of vintage styling and fashion in a way that doesn't exist with a lot of modern beauty standards. So when you look at somebody, and I think, this is like, people love Dita. I think this is all part of that. Like, why is her waist so tiny? Oh, she's wearing a corset. Why is her hair so bouncy and strong? Oh, well, I can see that it's a type of black or red that comes out of a dye, and she's obviously spent hours waving it. Why are her lashes so long? They're fake. Why are her lips so plump? They're red lipstick. Like all of stockings and girdles and fastenings, and it's a kind of beauty where there's nothing hidden. And so when you watch it, you can say, oh, if I learnt those things and bought those outfits, I could look like that. Mm-hmm. And obviously for me, that's not the whole of what burlesque is. But I think people are comforted, and I agree with this idea that actually it's more inclusive, I suppose, because I haven't pretended that I've bounced out of bed that way. I'm not gaslighting you into thinking that I naturally look this way. If you want to put the time in to learn the techniques and buy the products, you can have this fashion aesthetic too. I think people love that, and I get it.
No, I totally get it. It was, I had never thought about it before you described it that way, because I also think that sometimes that vintage beauty model can have a sort of negative implication because it's seen as a sort of trad wife, 1950s.
Yeah, adhering to male beauty standards.
Yeah. But actually, if you break it down, it's much more powerful and I think much more intentional and inclusive, like you say, than this concept that you should just naturally wake up and look like Kim Kardashian, and if you don't, you're a failure.
Yeah. Were you not thin and white? What's wrong with you?
Yeah. How could you?
I know. You're a failure.
Well, I would say this episode was not a failure. How about we finish off our body image episode by going and getting a nice, juicy steak?
I love it. But before we do that, do you want to know? Only because I bothered to do the research and preparation.
Rewind.
I'm shoehorning it in and I don't care. Christina, do you know one of the major reasons as to why thinness became such a prevalent Western beauty standard?
Nope, I can't wait to hear.
Well, I'm sure gonna tell you. So I'm going to finish on a little story. It's mini, but I'm going to give you a resource where you can listen to another podcast talk for like 4 hours on this topic. Have you ever heard of a guy called Edward Bernays? So when I heard about this, it was like I woke up with a second head. It was like I looked up and the moon was made of cheese. It was just such a perspective shift on just the way I looked at the entire world. So I'm going to give you the breadcrumbs. You can go away and look at this. But Edward Bernays is often called the father of PR and marketing. So prior to Edward Bernays, marketing was mostly, do you want to live longer? Drink this tonic. It costs 1 dime. Edward Bernays spearheaded this idea that you would be better off to create a problem and then present your product as the solution. And the thing he's most famous for is in the 1920s doing this for the cigarette brand Lucky Strike. Now, smoking in the 20s was an activity mostly done by men, but it was not considered ladylike. And so, like all good capitalist industries, corporations, Lucky Strike wanted to expand their market, and they wanted to expand into women. So Edward Bernays came up with these 2 genius ideas that once you hear, you will never think of the same way again. The first one is so obviously smoking is an appetite suppressant. So He created the mainstreaming of the beauty ideal of thinness. The reason that when you think of the 1920s and you think of these like very slender, high society women, it's because he flooded magazines with very slender models. Then he went to restaurants and clubs where wealthy people, hotels frequented to make sure that Lucky Strikes were listed on their menu. And then he launched his campaign to tell women to slim down and reach for a Lucky instead of a sweet. So he started by creating the problem, you're not skinny enough, and that being skinny was this really important, powerful, desirable ideal. Then he presented the product. Honestly, it's so clever, you could just vomit. The other part of the story, which I kind of love, although it's also hideous, is that to tie this all in, the 1920s, of course, time of women's suffrage. It's post-First World War, where a lot of women had been able to come out of the home and get into the workplace, supporting the war effort. And so it was a great time of shifting roles for women and men in society. And so because, again, smoking flouted the conventions of what was ladylike, he dubbed cigarettes torches of freedom. And then he paid beautiful young socialites to join women's marches whilst smoking. So he tied smoking into this idea of like women's rebellion, women's suffrage, women's fight for liberation. Isn't that incredible?
But he's like the ultimate evil genius.
Yes. Yes.
Terrifying.
Edward Bernays, his famous book, whose name now escapes me, but it will come up, Crystallizing Publicity or something. Anyway, it is not long. You can order it. There's also a podcast called Behind the Bastards, who have done a 2-parter on him, and it's very interesting. I really recommend it.
I think it's a great note to finish on because it also just completely highlights how ridiculous and trivial all this is, and that we like suffer through it. It's our own, but it's of our own, of it's somebody else's making to some degree, and then it's just of our own choosing to carry it around.
Yeah, and like they didn't even care whether you were thin or not. They just wanted to sell you some cigarettes.
God.
Well, on that note, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you for listening.